So we're in the 2020 BMW M8 competition convertible, 617 horsepower, 0 to 16 under 3 seconds, top speed of, if there were no limits, probably close to 200 miles an hour. Yet it also has neck coolers, or neck heaters I should say, seat coolers, every luxury you can imagine outside of seat massagers essentially. This is a car that costs almost $180,000 but produces performance and luxury and frankly just an experience that rivals any car I've ever been in. It is a really, in a sense, pinnacle of the BMW range and pinnacle of the M range. So how does it drive? How does it feel? Let's check it out. So we're gonna start off in M2 mode, which, let's just say dials things up a little bit. To 11 maybe. In M speak, it's really to Sport Plus. So we have everything dialed into Sport Plus or Sport, depending. I find that Sport Plus actually, in some ways, has been dulled down from where it has been in the past in some cars, and obviously M will differentiate its products based on the kind of consumer that they think is going to actually buy the product. So the M8 is not necessarily going to be a track rat, it's not going to be an M2, and so you've got a little bit of, I'd say it's sort of a dose of luxury, if you will, here that you normally don't get. There is a smoothness in the transmission shifts on the Sport that you normally wouldn't get. Yet in Sport Plus, you get the full crack. I mean, accelerate from 0 to 60 from first to second, and you've got a pop and a crack that sounds, frankly, illegal. It's been a little bit difficult to see what is legal and not legal in terms of sound these days, especially with like the Jaguar F-Type, for instance. But this is a car that I would say gets close to it. It's interesting. I mean, it's a 617 horsepower vehicle, and yet, from a MPG standpoint, I mean, just thinking about efficiency for a second, I mean, I'm getting a lot of highway mileage for sure, but 20 miles per gallon for a week. I've been 1,200 miles in so far, and so it's really pretty interesting to see that type of efficiency given the just insanity that this car can deliver from a performance standpoint. And when I mean insanity, this is a well over 4,000 pound car. I can, and this is all-wheel drive too, it's worth mentioning, I can effortlessly drift this thing, and while it doesn't have the poise and precision of an M2, for instance, or BMWs of old, for a big car, it's got more precision than you could imagine. Now, precision is not the same thing as feel, of course. This car does not have the type of tactile response that an M2 would have, or even an M3 and M4, but it's got enough. Frankly, it's got more than you'd expect in 2020 in a car that you can only classify as fully digital. Now, granted, this is still a petrol power plant, 617 horsepower being pumped out of a V8 with twin turbos in the V. It's, in a sense, I look at this as the swan song for M8s. This is a car that, in a lot of ways, is a bit of a dinosaur. I mean, the BMW M brand has produced in the last, I'd say, decade, a number of cars that kind of defy the logic that you would have had sitting down in it the first time. I mean, I think about the M5 from a few years ago. I think about the new M5, which of course this car is loosely based on. And now, of course, you've got the M8. The next M8, the next iteration of this car is likely going to have some form of hybrid. Maybe it'll even have an inline 6 instead of a V8. And ultimately, we expect this thing to move into more of an electric type of product. We'll see. But nonetheless, this is, in a sense, the last of the breed. And, if you look at it in that lens, it's incredible what this car can do from a performance standpoint. Let's just talk about 0 to 60. We've seen Car and Driver get 2.5 out of the coupe version of this car. 2.5 seconds 0 to 60 is really more or less what Tesla has been able to achieve in its Model S in an electric power plant, which of course has torque instantaneously and, in a sense, sort of perfection dialed into traction control. That's incredible. I mean, it is mind-boggling that we see this performance out of a car like this. beyond that, I mean, I am driving in this car effortlessly. I'm just enjoying essentially a late Monday evening drive, toddling around the North Shore of Chicago, and really quite comfortable. And this, mind you, is in full M Sport mode. I mean, I can dial it back, and we go to M1. In fact, we can go to setup, and I see the entire array of settings right here. And so I've got engine, chassis, steering, and brake. So let's go to engine and go to Sport Plus. So all of a sudden you've got more burble, and you've got a quicker throttle response. So your throttle mapping has changed. Chassis, we'll go ahead and stiffen that up, and you know what that means. Your suspension, specifically your shocks, has changed. The electromagnetic properties of them have changed, so it's stiffer. Steering, this is an E-Pass system, so I go from comfort to sport. It's now stiffer. People claim it has more feel. I don't believe it does. I just think it's frankly, it's just got more friction to it, if you will. And then brake, and this is interesting. Of course, this is an electric brake by wire, and so brakes are more touchy in sport. I actually like it. These are carbon ceramics. This is an $8,000 option. I would say, given everything else on this car, it's kind of a mandatory, in my opinion, if you're going to spend the money. They're overkill for the street. They're just overkill. But that said, the ability that this car has to stop is unbelievable. I mean, it's truly unbelievable. And I think that's one of those things, when you think about technology and how it's really advanced this type of product, you know, the ability for turbos to get power out of an engine is certainly one of them. The ability of all-wheel drive to put performance down to the road, and then carbon ceramics. Stopping a car well over 4,000 pounds on a dime it's madness when you experience it, I can tell you. Much like the 2.5 seconds to 60 is madness. So you've got a car that, again, has a lot of bases covered in terms of performance. Frankly, the basis of a supercar. So the GoPro died, so I'm just going to finish this on my phone. So, you know, as I was saying, this is a car that in a lot of ways has broken the myth of a supercar. You know, this is a product that is able to not just meet but beat a lot of those numbers that we saw from Ferraris and McLarens 5, 6, 7 years ago. You know, it's a car that does it with luxury and a level of finesse that you would just never imagine is possible. $180,000 is a lot for a BMW, and as a massive BMW fan, I'm happy to admit that. But there's something special about this M8. There's something also a little bittersweet, you know, when you think about this as the last of a generation, the last of its kind. You know, it's in a sense the conclusion of where M had been going for the longest time. Being able to produce this much power out of a V8 and still get 20 miles per gallon. You know, think about that. This much power, and yet it's completely drivable, completely docile. You know, heading to your local coffee shop or going to the grocery store or commuting, and yet it comes alive. Yet I can effortlessly drift this thing through corners and hold it and have total confidence in where the car is placed and where the limits are and how to kind of come back from them. And so in a lot of ways, this is the ultimate large M product. This is the ultimate. This is that, you know, when you think about that M6 from the 80s, this is its, you know, conclusion, if you will, before we start to move to that hybrid product. And for that, it's absolutely a success, and you have to congratulate him on what they've done here. This is truly a tremendous car.